The gilded halls of Buckingham have seen their share of whispers. But this is something altogether different. Imagine the heavy scent of polished oak and candle wax clinging to the air as courtiers shuffle nervously, clutching scrolls sealed with the royal crest. A decree, signed in the unmistakable hand of King Charles, bears a second signature that makes the corridors buzz even louder, Princess Anne's. And the contents? Enough to shake the palace at its very foundations. Word has spread that Queen Camilla, once Charles's long-fought love-turned consort, has been quietly edged out of a crucial decree. Her name absent where it once would have been unthinkable to omit. In her place, rising like a star through the fog of tradition, is Princess Catherine. No longer just the supportive wife of the heir, Catherine is being thrust to the power frontline, her presence stamped in ink alongside the monarch and his iron-willed sister. As I picture it, I can almost see the wax seal cracking open under trembling fingers, the gasps from staff who realize what's missing and, more dangerously, what's been added. For me, this isn't just a piece of paper, it feels like a sword cutting through centuries of royal hierarchy. Here's a microfact that underscores the gravity. In British royal history, decrees signed jointly by monarch and senior royals are rare, often tied to seismic shifts in governance, like the Regency Acts. To see Anne's hand next to Charles's is no small gesture, it's a signal. And so, dear listener, we find ourselves at the start of a drama where loyalty, power, and legacy collide. But to grasp why this decree matters so deeply, we need to step back and look at the stage that set it all in motion, the fragile balance between Charles, Anne, Camilla, and Catherine, and the pressures that forced such a drastic move. To truly understand the weight of this new royal decree, we must step into the intricate chessboard of Buckingham Palace, where every move carries centuries of consequence. King Charles ascended the throne with promises of modernizing the monarchy, slimming it down, and making it more relatable to the public. His vision was not one of endless pomp, but of efficiency, leaner, sharper, and above all, sustainable in an era where scrutiny is relentless. At his side stood Queen Camilla, the woman he fought for across decades of scandal and controversy. Her coronation as consort was meant to symbolize redemption and continuity, proof that love could weather even the fiercest storms of public opinion. Yet even then, the ghost of Diana lingered, and Camilla never quite captured the unshakable loyalty of the people. Polls often showed her approval lagging far behind Charles, William, and Catherine. For all her titles, she remained fragile in the court of public sentiment. Then there is Princess Anne, the so-called workhorse of the monarchy. Tireless, practical, and famously blunt, she has built a reputation as the royal most devoted to duty rather than glamour. Anne has long understood that survival of the monarchy depends not on tradition alone, but on proving its relevance. Her voice, though rarely amplified, carries weight within palace walls. When Anne adds her name to a decree, it isn't a gesture, it's a declaration. And finally, Catherine. Once dismissed as common Kate, she has grown into a global icon of grace, poise, and quiet authority. Every engagement she attends draws headlines not for scandal, but for admiration. She represents stability, family values, and the future that millions of Britons can believe in. Unlike Camilla, Catherine has the kind of organic public approval that cannot be manufactured. She is in many ways the monarchy's most valuable asset. I must admit, when I trace these threads together, the picture is startling. A monarchy slimmed down under Charles's vision, guided by Anne's relentless duty, but fronted by Catherine's radiant popularity, it almost feels inevitable. And in that framework, Camilla begins to look like an outlier, a remnant of the past rather than the face of the future. Here's a microfact that sharpens the point. Queen Victoria once relied heavily on her daughter, Princess Royal, to serve as a public face during times of crisis, quietly sidelining other less popular royals. History, it seems, has a way of repeating itself, so the stage is set. A decree signed by Charles and Anne, subtly but unmistakably diminishing Camilla's role while elevating Catherine, is not just paperwork. It is the visible tip of a much larger shift, a rebalancing of power within the monarchy itself. And just when the world thought it was business as usual inside Buckingham, the first signs began to appear: small omissions, curious choices, subtle clues that something was brewing long before this decree was sealed. Royal shifts never happen overnight. They creep in quietly, masked as routine adjustments. until suddenly, the pattern is too glaring to ignore. With this latest decree, the signs had been there for months, small, almost invisible details that only the most devoted palace watchers picked up. The first whispers began when Camilla's name was conspicuously absent from a minor announcement about ceremonial roles. At the time, it was brushed off as clerical oversight. Yet those who follow the monarchy closely knew better. The palace rarely makes mistakes in its paperwork. Every name, every title is vetted with obsessive precision. So when the queen consort's name disappeared, even once, the gossip mill stirred. Then came Catherine's sudden prominence at high-profile events. She began appearing not just at schools or charitable visits, but at state-level functions traditionally reserved for the reigning consort. Cameras caught her walking beside Charles during a diplomatic reception, her posture confident, her smile drawing more attention than any of the dignitaries present. I must confess, as I watched the footage, I felt it was as if Catherine had already stepped into a higher role, and the crowd responded instinctively, treating her not just as a princess, but as a queen-in-waiting. Here's a micro-fact to sharpen the lens. In 1953, Prince Philip often accompanied Queen Elizabeth II at state functions, but he never overshadowed her. In contrast, Catherine's presence at Charles's side often eclipsed Camilla's entirely. The optics were undeniable. Palace insiders began to murmur. Catherine was receiving more detailed briefings, meeting with senior advisors, even reviewing documents outside her usual portfolio. Meanwhile, Camilla's schedule quietly thinned. Fewer public appearances, fewer patronages highlighted in press releases. It was as though the palace was preparing the public for a swap subtle at first, but unmistakable to those paying attention. And then came the photographs, grainy shots of Catherine entering a late-night strategy meeting at Clarence House, files clutched under her arm, aides trailing behind. These images sent tabloids into a frenzy. "Future Queen already in training?" screamed one headline. Though the palace declined to comment, the silence spoke louder than any denial. The mini-climax arrived with the leak of an internal document. According to reports, Catherine's name appeared in a draft decree concerning royal engagements, where traditionally Camilla's name would have stood. Though the final draft was never released publicly, the mere suggestion ignited speculation. Was Catherine already taking Camilla's place in official paperwork? Imagine the tension in those palace corridors, staff shuffling nervously, eyes darting at the black and white text, knowing one absent name could rewrite the balance of power. For courtiers, it was a slip of ink. For the world, it was a glimpse into a seismic shift. By this point, the question was no longer if changes were coming. It was when and how far they would go. Catherine's rise, Camilla's gradual fade, Anne's quiet support, it was a storm forming just beyond the horizon. And soon, those whispers behind closed doors would spill into full-blown rumblings, pulling the entire palace into a struggle over loyalty, power, and survival. If the public caught glimpses of subtle shifts, inside Buckingham, those shifts had already hardened into battle lines. Behind the polished doors, a quiet war was underway, a war of influence, loyalty, and survival. At the heart of it stood King Charles, carrying the weight of modernizing the monarchy while battling whispers about his own health and stamina. He had envisioned a slimmed-down monarchy for years, and now, with Anne at his side, he began shaping that vision into reality. But slimming down meant choosing who stayed on the front line and who stepped back, and those choices were tearing the family apart. Princess Anne's role in this was unmistakable. Known for her blunt honesty, she reportedly pressed Charles with brutal clarity. The public trusts Catherine. They do not trust Camilla. Courtiers described Anne as unrelenting, her arguments laced with data from opinion polls, surveys, and the monarchy's own research on public sentiment. And Charles, though torn, could not ignore the numbers. Catherine's popularity towered over Camilla's, and in a monarchy that survives on perception, those numbers mattered more than sentiment. Meanwhile, Catherine herself was caught in a delicate dance. Publicly, she remained the picture of grace, smiling at engagements, avoiding any appearance of rivalry. Privately, however, she was being briefed more deeply than ever before. Senior advisors began looping her into strategic discussions, ones that Camilla used to lead. I must admit, I can almost picture Catherine in those meetings, her posture straight, her voice calm but firm, as officials laid out plans for the monarchy's future. not a passive observer anymore, but an active architect. Here's a micro-fact that underlines the shift. In 1937, when George VI struggled with public speaking, Queen Elizabeth, later the Queen Mother, stepped into public engagements to steady the monarchy's image. History shows that when a royal consort falters, another figure must fill the gap. In this case, that figure was not Camilla, but Catherine. For Camilla, the changes were devastating. Friends confided that she felt isolated, her influence shrinking with each passing week. Invitations once addressed to her alone now bore Catherine's name alongside William's courtiers, who once bent toward her orbit began seeking Catherine's approval instead. One insider claimed Camilla snapped during a private dinner, declaring, "They're erasing me." The press, catching whiffs of the tension, began circling. Rumors of palace divisions filled tabloid pages. Some painted Anne as the mastermind behind Camilla's sidelining. Others framed Catherine as the inevitable future, the face the monarchy had to embrace. And through it all, Charles remained outwardly calm, yet increasingly withdrawn, as if weighed down by the knowledge that his personal loyalty clashed with his duty to the crown. The mini-climax came with the signing of the decree itself. For the first time in decades, Anne's signature appeared alongside Charles's on a royal document that reshaped ceremonial responsibilities. Camilla's name was nowhere to be found, but Catherine's? Prominent, bold, undeniable. For staff who saw it, the message was clear. This wasn't just a reallocation of duties, it was a formal elevation. I can almost hear the stunned silence that followed in that room, the scratching of quills stopping mid-sentence, the flicker of gas lamps reflecting on the parchment, aides exchanging quick, anxious glances. One decision, one decree, and the balance of power tilted visibly toward Catherine. From that moment, the whispers became a roar. Camilla's position, once protected by Charles's devotion, now seemed precarious. Catherine's ascent was no longer speculation, it was written into the very paperwork of the monarchy. And as news of the decree began to seep into public discourse, the stage was set for the inevitable explosion, the big blow-up that would drag the entire royal family into the spotlight once again. There are moments in royal history when silence no longer suffices, when a private reshuffle bursts into the public domain and shakes the monarchy to its core. That moment arrived the instant the new decree was revealed. For weeks it had lingered in whispers, ink on parchment hidden from the public eye. But when its contents finally emerged, Charles and Anne's joint signatures, Catherine's name etched firmly into roles of influence, and Camilla's omission, Buckingham could no longer control the narrative. The headlines landed like cannon fire. Camilla cast aside. Catherine elevated to royal power frontline. Anne and Charles unite in palace shakeup. Television anchors spoke with hushed awe, framing it as the most dramatic redistribution of royal power since the abdication crisis. Even seasoned commentators admitted they had never seen a queen consort diminished in such a visible, official way. Camilla, sources said, was blindsided. She had known her influence was waning, but seeing her name absent from a decree signed at the very top, the king and his sister, was a humiliation she could not ignore. One aide described her expression as ashen, her hands trembling as she read the document. For a woman who had endured decades of public disdain only to finally reach the crown, the blow was crushing. Catherine, by contrast, stepped into the spotlight with characteristic poise. Her next public engagement came just days after the decree became known. Cameras flashed as she entered, not simply as the supportive wife of the heir, but as the newly minted figure of authority. I must confess, the images were striking Catherine in a tailored coat of royal blue, her posture regal, the crowd cheering as if they instinctively recognized her as the monarchy's frontline representative. Here's a micro-fact that gives context. The last time a royal consort was so visibly sidelined was in the mid-1502, when Catherine Howard, Henry VIII's queen, was stripped of her titles before her downfall. While modern times carry no such brutal fate, the symbolism of a queen excluded remains historically seismic. Public reaction was explosive. Supporters of Catherine hailed the move as inevitable, praising her as the future queen who already embodied dignity and modern appeal. Critics of Camilla argued that her role had always been tenuous, propped up more by Charles's loyalty than public approval. Yet, sympathy also flowed toward her, with some commentators calling it a cruel betrayal after years of service at Charles's side. The media storm grew fiercer with every hour. Late-night talk shows in America mocked the idea of a queen consort fired on paper. British tabloids churned out endless spreads, dissecting every angle: Anne's role as enforcer, Charles's cold pragmatism, Catherine's radiant rise. Social media split into factions. Number Queen Catherine trended alongside number Stand with Camilla, turning the monarchy into the internet's favorite battleground. Inside Buckingham, tensions boiled over. Camilla reportedly confronted Charles in private, demanding answers. The king, sources said, tried to soothe her, insisting the decision was about the crown's survival, not personal rejection. But his words rang hollow against the weight of the parchment, his own signature betraying him. Anne, unrepentant, was said to have reminded Charles that history would judge him not for whom he loved, but for whom he chose to elevate in the service of the crown. The blow-up was complete. Camilla had been ousted from the decree, Catherine elevated, and the world left reeling. The monarchy's carefully crafted image had fractured in plain sight, and with every headline, every whispered conversation, the question grew louder. Could the royal family survive this internal war of succession and symbolism? And as dawn broke the next morning, the fallout began: public opinion, political pressure, and private heartbreak, colliding in a storm that threatened to redefine the monarchy itself. The ink on the decree may have dried, but its impact rippled far beyond Buckingham's iron gates. In the hours and days that followed, the monarchy found itself thrust into a storm of commentary, speculation, and division. The royal family had always been a symbol of continuity, yet now it looked more fractured than ever. The media feasted on the drama. Tabloids printed side-by-side images: Catherine, radiant and smiling at her latest engagement, contrasted with Camilla, caught in a grainy shot leaving Clarence House with downcast eyes. Headlines screamed of betrayal and replacement. In Britain, public polls suggested that a majority supported Catherine's elevation, with many describing her as the future the monarchy needs. Meanwhile, sympathy for Camilla flickered but never caught flame. Her decades of baggage made it hard for her to rally lasting public support. Across the Atlantic, American commentators took a different tone. Some saw the move as a power play, branding it the palace coup of 2025. Others cast Catherine as a modern Diana, rising as the people's queen while Camilla slipped into irrelevance. I must confess, scrolling through the commentary, I was struck by how global the reaction was. The story wasn't confined to British tabloids. It was headline news in New York, Sydney, and Toronto. Here's a micro-fact that shows just how unusual this fallout was. In modern royal history, decrees have typically reinforced stability, not upheaval. They formalized duties, delegated tasks, but rarely sparked public scandal. For this decree to ignite such division marked it as one of the most disruptive in decades. Inside the palace, the atmosphere turned icy. Camilla reportedly canceled several upcoming appearances, retreating from the public eye. Courtiers whispered of her isolation, describing a queen consort who felt erased by her own husband's pen. Catherine, in contrast, pressed forward, her schedule busier than ever. Hospitals, schools, diplomatic receptions, she became the visible face of the monarchy overnight. Each appearance reinforced the narrative that she wasn't just the future queen, she was already acting as one. Charles, trapped between personal loyalty and public duty, grew quieter in his public role. Some insiders claimed he buried himself in paperwork, avoiding direct confrontation with Camilla. Princess Anne, ever pragmatic, doubled down on her support for Catherine, insisting that the monarchy had no choice but to adapt or collapse. The fallout extended beyond family dynamics. Political commentators began asking hard questions. If Camilla's role could be diminished by decree, what did that say about the monarchy's stability? Was Catherine's sudden rise a bold modernization or proof of internal chaos? And for the public, the drama became addictive. Every new photograph, every whispered leak, every canceled appearance was devoured, as if the monarchy had become a live-action soap opera. The crown glittered as always, but beneath it, cracks widened for the world to see. The stage was set for the next chapter. Would Camilla fade quietly into the background, or would she fight back with revelations of her own? Could Charles balance love and duty, or had the decree tipped the scale irreversibly? One thing was certain, the story wasn't ending here. The fallout was only the prelude to something even more dangerous. And so, the royal decree became more than just parchment and ink. It became a weapon, slicing through tradition and exposing fractures long hidden. Camilla, once crowned beside Charles as a symbol of enduring love, now found herself edged out, her role diminished, her silence louder than any public statement. Catherine, meanwhile, stepped forward as the luminous face of the monarchy, her every move watched, her every smile dissected as though she were already queen. But here's the question, dear listener. Is this truly the dawn of a new royal order, or merely the opening act of a battle yet to be fought? For if history tells us anything, it is that those sidelined by the crown rarely vanish quietly. Camilla knows the palace's secrets, alliances, resentments, vulnerabilities. To retreat meekly has never been her way. I must confess, as I imagine Buckingham's gilded halls bathed in moonlight, I can almost hear the whispers echoing. What will Camilla do next? Will Charles find himself torn apart between his duty to the crown and his devotion to his wife? And will Catherine, thrust into the power frontline, withstand the weight of expectation, or will the spotlight burn hotter than she ever imagined? This decree may look like an ending, but it feels more like the spark of an even greater storm. And trust me, the next chapter promises to be darker, riskier, and far more explosive than the last. Stay with us. The drama is only just beginning.